The growing calls across the nation to defund the police.
To end policing as we know it.
Off the charts violence in New York City. 11 people shot in just 8 hours on
This is
Sunday.
about the police officers who every single day put on that uniform and they run towards danger when we run away from it.
Did that not work? Guns up. Didn't unmute me in time.
Why?
Didn't unmute me in time. I really went all in on that guns up as well.
I guess.
Funny thing is, I saw you in the little screen where the preview just talking to yourself.
I wonder, what is the percentage across all episodes? I think this is like episode like 37-ish, 38. I don't know, like that we've had total.
It's like 30.
No, it's not. I mean, I'm talking about night shifts. Every time we've done the show, like every show we've ever done.
Okay.
Yeah. What is the percentage of times that we have actually gotten that right?
Terrible echo.
Yeah.
Hold on, we're like.
Do they not know we're live?
I know we're live. Can you hear me?
Hear us? I can hear you just fine.
I'm hearing the show somewhere in my headphones.
Guns up, nuts out. Ruben
And,
says.
I think it's
I'm gonna try to
because
hold this show
Jimmy's-
together. I'm gonna try to hold it together.
Hold on. Are we good now? Oh, we're good now. Are we
There
live?
really is no holding on. You don't hold on a live show.
Guns up.
This is why I was asking if you guys were ready.
The underpaid producer was asking them for 17 minutes, "Are you guys ready?" And they're like, "Yeah, we're waiting on you."
Well, that's what happens when you pay your producer too much money.
The truth always comes out. Just remember that, everybody. That's the moral of the story. The truth will always come out. And I want to make a joke about that, but I don't feel like I know the best punchline for it. But welcome to the show, brought to you by
Ghost Bed.
Sleep so good it's scary. What do we got here?
Baby,
Tell
we
us about our
love
sponsor.
Ghost Bed. We're gonna knock it out because we have a. We're gonna knock it out now because we have a guest that's
Our
absolutely
first
gonna put you to
returning
sleep.
guest.
Yeah, returning guest. By popular demand, he's gonna put you to sleep. So go ahead and get your. I'm just kidding. He's not gonna put you to sleep. This is one of our best guests. So we're gonna knock out the ad read early so that he can just talk for the rest of the day. We love Ghost Bed. Been a loyal sponsor with the Drinking Bros for the past 5 years. It's got to be almost 6 years now because we're on a new year. It's 2022, baby. They have super comfortable mattress that last forever, made in the good old USA. Yeah, nobody else wants to do it with me. Okay. You guys don't like America. Every mattress has a 20-year warranty. Some even have a 25, and you can try it out for 101 nights. Not 98, not 99, but 101, baby. If you don't like it, you can send them back. No hard feelings, but you won't. One of our favorite parts about Ghost Bed is that each mattress has that cooling technology in it. So if you get hot during our snowpocalypse, spring, summer flash day that we have coming on Sunday, every weather channel is different about what's going to happen here in North Carolina on Sunday. Some say we're going to get a blizzard. Some say it's going to be a beautiful day in the 70s. Some say it's going to rain. There's no telling at this point. But no matter what, you can get those cooling sheets that Ghost Bed have that are an absolute lifesaver, and they're always going to keep you cool so that you can stay hard while staying cool. Ghost Bed also offers bundles so that you can get everything you need. You don't even have to really think about it. Just choose from their 4 mattresses and then pick your bundle. So whether you just need a mattress and a frame or you want it all, I want it all.
I want it all.
And I want it now.
I think
like their cooling
Jimmy
pillows
was,
and sheets.
on point there.
Yeah, he is. You can get the best bang for your buck. Right now, Ghost Bed is offering 40% off of Ghost Bed bundles where you get the mattress and adjustable base. 30% off everything if you use that code Drinkin' Bros, DRINKIN Bros at ghostbed.com/Drinkin' Bros. $35 a month, 0% down, 0% financing. And that's if you have firefighter credit. Go check out ghostbed.com/Drinkin' Bros today and get you a bed that sleeps so good it's scary.
I had a hard time getting out of mine this morning. I know that.
Well, you were late to the show, so
I was late to the show
sense.
today. Well, BC, are you there? Are you there? Are you live?
How do I undo it? You got me muted.
Yep.
No, he's not
muted. No, you're not muted. No, you just talk, baby.
See, that's why I don't run podcasts, man. I don't know what I'm doing over here. Don't let me touch anything on this keyboard.
I feel like
Yeah, just let me run my mouth.
Yeah, don't touch anything.
I feel like BC's name should be Teeter from Yellowstone, because he's got that deep accent. He's got that accent, man.
I haven't seen any episode of Yellowstone.
Do you ever watch TV?
Well, if you
No.
Do you have a TV?
I have a TV. Yeah, I don't watch a whole lot of TV.
You don't do anything.
His TV is one of the fancy ones that had the built-in VHS. That's what he's rocking. It's got the RCA's right on the front, so it's convenient to plug in your Nintendo.
Yeah, it's got the rabbit ears with tinfoil wrapped around. Like,
Yeah.
legit. Like, why would I watch TV?
I don't know. It's really funny because he came in here today and I was like, hey, man, that social media post you did the other day was raging, man. It got a lot of comments and he was like, what social media post? And I was like, the one on Instagram. And he was like, oh, it did good? And I was like, yeah, it did good. And he was like, which one? And I was like trying to tell him. And he's like just sitting, he's like, oh, I don't know, man. He's like, I just throw things up because I have to. And I don't even know. And I was like trying to show him how to like look at his insights.
It was pretty ugly.
It's pretty ugly. I was pretty embarrassed for him, actually.
It's bad.
But for those of you who don't know, BC Sanders is back. He crushes one of our biggest Tuesday night shows ever as a guest. BC Sanders, that is a code name for him. That is not his real name. I met Sanders a long time ago at one of the best classes I've ever taken, which was a gangs class. He is, are we allowed to say what you are now and everything? We can't say what you do. No, can't really do that.
Generic.
Okay, we'll keep it generic. But he's still in the industry.
He's a crossing guard.
Yes, yes.
He keeps the children safe.
Yeah, at a charter school. So, but anyway, just a fascinating guy and one of the best classes that you could ever take. And we brought him back on because 1 hour just wasn't enough. So he's back.
Appreciate it.
Well, BC, catch me up on what since I was down and out when you were here with Tansy last. For myself or for listeners that haven't caught up on part one yet, but will go back and do that or whatever, catch me up on what is available public knowledge that we can all know about you from from childhood, early childhood, all the way up to now. Like, what's your experience that you bring into the table from a law enforcement perspective?
Yeah, so like last time I talked a little bit about it, but I didn't grow up maybe like a lot of other cops did. I grew up in like the punk rock, hardcore scene, skateboarding. Obviously grew up in the South because you can hear the accent. But just kind of loved that lifestyle. And then eventually ended up going in the Army, did 4 years in the Army in an infantry unit. Got out, went to college, got a psychology degree, and then joined the police department. So pretty much straightforward, nothing too crazy. But then once I got on the police department, and I've been on for, let's just keep it generic and say 20 years. But when I first got on is when we were starting to see a lot of gang activity in the South that you could actually articulate and say, yeah, this is a gang and like a nationally recognized gang, not like, 5 or 6 neighborhood guys that are getting together to sell drugs or whatever. Like legit blood sets moving in. And that was probably like one of the first waves we saw was like blood sets moving in, Crips and Soreños and a lot of other stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much how I grew up, my background.
And then what happened? Like, where were you? Like, what did that turn into?
What's that? Like
career-wise?
gang stuff? Oh yeah. So basically, starting to learn about the gangs, I just kind of transitioned into a gang unit for a couple of years. Did an assignment with a career criminal type unit, working a gang, basically dismantling them. I've done aggravated assault assignments, homicide assignments, drugs and vice. I started designing training courses years ago because every class I only took like maybe 2 classes on gangs that just they weren't hitting it. You know what I mean? Like you walk into a room and they kind of tell you the generic info about gangs. I wanted to be able to walk into a room and say, okay, I want to know everything from the ground up, like how they work, how they operate, their rank structure, hand signs, why someone ties their shoes a certain way, like everything, what the graffiti means, what tattoos mean. So then once I started learning all of that, that's how I kind of packaged into classes that I could actually train deputies, cops, agents. I've done a couple of conferences where sheriffs have been there and stuff. So it was just nice that there was an audience for people to actually take those classes and then apply it when they get back out into the street. on different levels, either investigators doing homicides or shootings, or drug investigators would use it because it's applicable to the drug world, obviously. But there's just always a big demand. So that's kind of like how once I got into that and started learning all the ins and outs and taking informants and actually bringing them to some of my training and even some of my briefings with specialized units. You just go into a room and sit down with an informant, especially for like certain areas like apartment complexes or areas where you're seeing a lot of activity, a lot of violence. If you've got really good gang informants who can give you the intel, not like going out there and just buying a gun off of somebody or buying some drugs off of somebody. It's very specific intel of who lives where, who operates where their stash spots are, how they react to police when police respond. You can get their background, be like, well, what's it like when a blue and white or when a patrol vehicle comes by? Oh, everybody hits a certain cut, or they hide in a certain apartment. Okay, well, who lives there? Well, this is the person who lives there. And you just go on basically for like 2 hours and just brief up a unit to where then they can stand alone and go work that intel and not necessarily just focus on like one gun buy or one drug buy. It's like the whole area. How do you decimate that area?
And it's cool because for those of you who don't know, Sanders is here with me right now, but that's why I'm looking off in the distance at him and not at the camera. Some people are like,
somebody thought you had a stroke.
Yeah. But Sanders, he's not so much undercover, like an undercover guy. That's not why we have him blacked out or anything like that, but he's more of like a very intel-driven style guy where he really manipulates gangs from the inside, from jail calls, from manipulating how their rank structure works. So he can snag somebody off the street to get somebody else promoted in these gangs so that they can work different ways with different informants. And it's really just this it's just overblown with intelligence and mapping and graphing. And I actually got a chance to go into their intel room one time, and it was just fascinating. I really felt like I was in like NCIS or something. But the way that they map things out, and so because we can't have him on the camera, he can't be on the camera, and there's really good reasons why. He's worked some really high profile, crazy cases that actually involved people getting kidnapped. We mentioned it on the last show. And so it's kind of a big deal stuff. But if you want to know what BC Sanders looks like, if you've ever seen Sicario, the dude with the big nerdy guy with the square glasses that looks like Chester from Linkin Park, rest in peace. That's what he looks like.
Yeah, that's legit.
That's
Perfect
funny.
description.
Just that opening description, BC gave me a bunch of questions that I wrote down that I want to ask, and of course, if the underpaid producer will set aside good questions, maybe that pop up or something like that too, so that we can get to people that are maybe asking questions in the comments that we can set aside to ask. But my first question, out of all of the things that you were bringing up in your experience, is you're talking about informants and relying on informants as a piece of this. What, in your experience, motivates someone to be an informant? What is the typical reason someone will flip or be willing to be an informant for you guys as you try to infiltrate further into the organizations?
Yeah, so when I usually just use the term source a lot of times because informant, you know what I mean, and you know that. But either way, so if I say source or informant, just use them the same way. But it basically folds out to, you can have someone with existing charges. So someone may be looking at 3 or 4 felony charges involving narcotics, and they may be offered a deal to work substantial or to work to make bigger cases in order to get their sentence reduction. And that's usually what most people, when they talk about informants in cop work, is very singular like that. When we're talking about gang members becoming informants, sometimes they may be a source for years, for 2 or 3 or 4 years. So within the organization, there's a few things. They may be pushing to make rank in that organization, and they could be kind of like what I categorize as like a true believer. So like they believe in everything, like the code of conduct. If there are certain rules they have to follow, then they follow them to a T. You know what I mean? Like it becomes their whole identity. Mm-hmm. And then you may have some guys that are in the gang, and they're just kind of like I call them mercenaries, but they'll go with any set in order to make money.
Yeah.
So if you find someone that kind of personality template that is like a mercenary where it's like all about the money, then they're easily influenced to become an informant if you in fact are paying them for their time. So sometimes you'll have sources that will actually work strictly for money just because of that, because they may actually make more money as a source or an informant than they would in the gang or in a criminal lifestyle, because not all people make a whole lot of money in the drug game or whatever their hustle is.
Did you ever hear of or read that book, Freakonomics? I can't remember who it was by, but he broke it down to where he asserted that gangs make like less. The average gang member makes less than minimum wage.
Yes, yeah, that's the truth. So when you get into the drug world, the image is everyone makes stacks of cash, drives nice cars, and all that. But really, no one's making that kind of money until they get really high up and they got a really good plug, and they're flipping large packages, not selling on the street. But the sales pitch is sell enough and work on this level, and you work your way up. But really, most people never get to that
because they end up going to jail. And then if they do get that high, we talked about that. If they do get that high, it's because they are snitching,
right?
To stay out of jail. So they're
yeah. And so if they're sitting there and let's say they've got a stack of $3,000 or $4,000, right? Sometimes, sadly, guys will post a picture on social media of their stack of cash, and literally within an hour, they could be getting robbed by people within their own set. You know what I'm saying? Like, so while you've got $3,000 forward of profit, now you just lost it. And if you got fronted that product, or maybe that's not profit, maybe you owe that back to your connect or whatever because you got fronted the substance that you just sold. So. Yeah, Freakonomics is good stuff. Any of that where you start breaking it down into daily activity and cost of life, a lot of guys don't have to pay bills. They don't have, car payments. Some guys may not have a whole lot of that, so they kind of live a nomadic lifestyle for that reason, so that whatever money they make, they can spend however they want to. Now, there are some guys out there who operate in the gang drug world that are very, very intelligent, and they do save their money, and they do stay low-key. And those guys actually move up the ranks. And you see them 10 years down the road, and they've transitioned into actual legit businesses or maybe club promotions. Or they start to do something else other than staying in that drug world. But
how do they maintain, like, the perception is once you're in a gang, like, it's very, very difficult to get out. So do they have, if someone advances like that and ends up, like you said, owning a club, or they kind of turn to investing their money into a legitimate business, as it were, do they still have to then allow that legitimate business to be sort of like a pass-through for the gang?
We still see like NFL players throwing up gang signs. Is that?
Yeah,
like they're still in it.
Yeah. So two things. Yeah. Sadly, you do see kind of the mainstreaming of gangs. So you will see maybe athletes throwing gang signs. Musicians getting into that world, or maybe they were a gang member before their music took off. If a gang member is in a gang and they have a legit business, and every gang operates differently. So sometimes when I start talking about gangs, some officers or deputies or agents, they may only have dealt with, like say Latin Kings. So immediately they think everything through that Latin King filter, where Bloods may operate differently. So each gang kind of operates differently, like any other business or organization would. So some gangs are criminal organizations, but on the surface look very legit, or look like they're really well, and they are sometimes like really well organized, and the members are actually disciplined and not getting into like street beefs and just shooting back and forth for just the sake of committing violence. So if someone's within some of those gangs and they actually have a legit business, it could be completely detached from the gang itself. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. Some other gangs may operate like we all eat from the same table. So if you're making money, I'm making money, we basically can kind of share it. Not a lot of people dig that. It's a good sales pitch if you're broke.
Is that socialism?
It's rooted in. It's definitely rooted in.
That's funny. There's got to be like these political parties, like all in gangs too. Like
So
what
when
does
you
a liberal
yeah.
versus conservative gang member look like?
Right. So if you go back and look at a lot of the gangs when they started transitioning and spreading across the U.S., there was a lot of like militant, I guess you could say like propaganda or sales pitch or however you want to say it, that started getting adopted by some of these gangs. And so then, when that starts to kind of happen, it's used in order to recruit. Like I said, so if someone's impoverished, they're broke, and a gang comes along and they maybe they got a cousin in the gang or something, and they get kind of introduced to it and they start hanging out and they start hearing this like, damn, this dude's got $3,000 and he just broke off $200 to my cousin, just gave it to him right out of his pocket, like we all look after each other, right? So if you've got a gang that's got 50, 60, 70 members, that can be a lot of wealth, especially to a kid coming from a background with not a whole lot of money. So you can kind of see how, like a lot of people say, well, why would anybody join a gang? The question to ask is like, why wouldn't kids join a gang? You know what I mean? Like if you're coming from a background where you're fighting for survival, here you have people that now have your back. Now, that doesn't say that not every gang member doesn't come from that, the stereotypical broken family or, single parent who's addicted to drugs or something. It's across the whole spectrum. So you can have a gang member putting in the most work, meaning they're out there running and gunning, shooting people like they're the one you don't mess with, and you find out that dude's from a family of two parents, $300,000 home, both parents, part of mainstream society, they have jobs. They may even have brothers and sisters that have jobs. But that's the wild card in the family who joins a gang for their own personal reasons. And then a lot of times they have more to prove, so they go harder than everybody else.
Right.
So
like the Island Boys. Island Boy.
I finally just learned who those guys were a couple days ago.
They're ballers, dude. They're
yeah.
they're hard.
Scared, they're scared of Logan Paul, though. That's for sure. I saw him back away when he stood up. But hey, so the inverse of this idea of what motivates someone to be a source. What are the primary ways? Maybe it's fascinating that you could have different culture. I mean, I guess it makes sense, right? Different cultures and different gangs. They don't all operate the same. But what maybe is a common theme or thread of the ways in which those that are at high levels in the gangs, surely they know and understand the game, right? Like that there's always going to be people trying to infiltrate, trying to hinder their operations or whatever. What are the primary walls that they build up, or how do they defend themselves in theory against being infiltrated by law enforcement or sources that are double agents, whatever it is? How do they stop that or try?
Hey, can you repeat that question? I'm messing with you, man. I'm messing with you. No,
I'm like, all right. Let me go back to the beginning of that one.
I was taking notes. I was taking notes. All right. No, so basically, anyone who gets to usually the top of the food chain, so to speak, has either done it, historically done it through violence, or they're the type of personality that when they walk into a room, everybody listens to them, or they have committed some type of murder or shooting that went unchecked. They never got arrested. So they use that to kind of build a myth of, getting away with all this stuff. You have some leaders that get there because they know how to treat people right. So they build that loyalty through taking care of people, right? So the way they check that at all times is usually they're more like and when I say street level gangs, I'm talking about like Bloods, Crips, like what a patrol officer probably would encounter of a group of guys hanging out somewhere. But organizations like that are often worried about people within their gang becoming an informant or a source, not the way maybe like some of the higher profile cases for like motorcycle clubs where you introduce an actual sworn agent to infiltrate that gang under a false name and background and all that. So within the gang itself, they are often on guard all the time. So they're very paranoid about accusing people of being snitches, of providing information. So sadly, you'll have a lot of inner violence within a gang over false claims or false information about someone being a source or an informant when in fact they really aren't. So some gangs have been smart enough to, it used to be the old adage, like blood in, blood out. Everybody's kind of heard that, like, you got to shed blood to get in the gang, or you got to
be beat in and beat out, right?
Right. So and I can talk later about how you actually get into certain sets and stuff. But when someone says, "Hey, I want out," like some sets will be like, "No, you can't just." They call it like laying down your flag, like putting your bandana down and saying, "Hey, I'm walking away from the gang." Some sets are like, "No, you can't do that. This is forever." You can maybe lay low for a little while, but you're never just walking away from the gang. The current trend, probably within the last maybe 8 to 10 years, a lot of gangs have, in the South at least, have realized if you keep people within the gang who don't want to be there, they can, in fact, become easier informants or easier sources. Yeah. So some of the trend is now, like, if somebody wants to lay their flag down or they want to leave the set, they can leave. Like, no questions asked. Don't try to create an enemy out of this person. Like, let them go, because when they leave, they're taking their secrets with them. So you don't want to make them mad necessarily, or put them out bad, so to speak. Now, one of the larger trends we've seen in the South is like set flipping, or like someone may be one set within UBN, United Blood Nation. So they could be one set and then flip to another set. And when they flip, the set they're in, they may hate. Like, they're disgruntled. They transfer, basically. They join this other blood set. And then once they join that organization, they're like, man, they treat me right. I love this place. So they may become a source or an informant for their own personal reasons or self-preservation if they have existing charges. They may actually cooperate on the old set they were in or the old gang, but not the new one, because they're more loyal to that new one, but they've got all this information and dirt on the other set. So right now there's so many guys that they may go through 2 or 3 different gangs in their lifetime, different sets.
So how loyal are, like, when you say set, so that I understand, you're referring to, like, if you have, like, the Bloods, different sets, they're both having blood colors, but they're sort of like different families within the same major organization.
Yeah, so think about it this way, like,
like if you're a cop, like, we'll just use cops as a big gang thing, right? And you fall under the Detroit Metro Police Department, and so you are Detroit Metro Police or UBN, United Blood Nation, and then you start off. The set that you're in is in the Southeast District, and then you go to the Northeast District. You're still Detroit Metro Police. You're just in a different set. The set would be the district. The gang would be Detroit Metropolitan Police. So if you're UBN and then you want to go to, like, you might be UBN.
You could be like 9 Trey.
9 Trey, and then you go to.
Yeah, you could flip. So
Sex, Money, Power, or whatever
murder,
it is.
Yeah. So it's like this.
Mob, baby, money over bitches.
Yeah, like
right. Well, those were sets, right?
Yeah,
like sex, money, power was a set.
Or
mob,
sex, money, murder.
Sex, money, murder, and then the one that you just mentioned is also a set. So you might flip over to one of those things.
Sex, money,
so
murder.
Yeah, the easiest way to think about this is think of like Blood or Crip. When someone says like, "Oh, that dude's a Crip," think of it like almost like a profession, and then go, okay, well, what business do they work for? You know what I mean? And then go down. So technically, a really good gang unit or even a really good agency that wants to get ahead of their gang problem would have their officers and detectives trained so that when they encounter someone, they can actually say and document, that person is, Crip. Okay, that's the broad umbrella term. But what are they? Oh, they're 8 Trey Gangster Crip. Okay, what block are they? Oh, they're Far West, right? So it takes a broad term, brings it down to the actual gang, then down to the set, to the block. And then from there, you could even go into like sublines or like a smaller section and then go, okay, this person is 8 Trey Gangster Crip, Far West. And then this is the crew, inner circle of people they're normally hanging around with, these 4 or 5 guys. And if you know that, then when one of those 4 or 5 guys gets involved in a shooting or a murder or something, then probably who their associates are. So then you can match that stuff up with, surveillance videos or security cameras from a convenience store during the crime scene or whatever. So it's just an idea of if you know every level of that gang member, the more you can document or the more you can articulate, the easier it is to solve crimes moving forward.
Do gangs? Oh, sorry.
No, I was gonna say, like, I think one of the best examples of this was something that we had learned from Sanders's class that that we had, and I talked about on the last show. But it was a gang wall, and so you had the set. So maybe it said sex, money, murder, and then you had like the 10 dudes, their arrest photos, their mugshot photos. You would have those down under sex, money, power, and then you would have right next to it money over bitches, and then you'd have the 10 dudes that were in money over bitches, and then you'd have Crips, and then you'd have the different sets of Crips, and you would have them all into this like cascading thing with notes off to the side. And so if you saw somebody from sex, money, power, and you noticed that they were hanging out with money over bitches, you could leave a note on his mugshot and said, hey, saw this guy hanging out with so-and-so with money over bitches. And then if somebody from sex, money, power ends up getting murdered, you might be able to go and question the guy that he was hanging out with. Like, hey, you were talking to so-and-so from money over bitches. What was that conversation like? Because he might be one of your informants. And so you can kind of keep track of the different sets. And I always thought that was like a really cool thing until they took the wall away because it was too successful.
All I can see is that that meme from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia with the photos and the red string everywhere, like trying to make sense of all the.
Well, it was awesome, man. We used to work that wall all the time. It's like you would spend like the good first 10 minutes of your shift looking at the wall to see what notes the last shift left on that wall. Problem was that there was too many people of color on the wall and not enough white people, and so they took the wall away. Unfortunately, the gang area that I worked in,
facts hurt everyone's feelings, or
yeah,
what?
It really was. I mean, there just simply wasn't any. UBN doesn't allow white people in their gangs. So sorry. I don't know. Does Crip allow white people in there?
Yeah, so you're correct. Like when Tansy's saying UBN, that's United Blood Nation. It's a East Coast only blood nation. So when someone says Bloods, it's like people go, oh yeah, they're all from LA. But I mean, that's the origin of it. But you have an entire nation. You're talking about thousands and thousands of guys and girls claiming some set within a UBN, a United Blood Nation. So I think it's like Rule 3 or 4 or whatever is, in fact, no whites allowed. So they do operate exclusively in a certain demographic, right? Crips, on the other hand, have kind of open ranks, and you may encounter a Crip of any kind of background. Most other gangs have kind of followed suit with that, kind of just the way society has. Society's kind of gotten a little more open-minded. So a lot of the gangs have kind of mimicked that. UBN's probably one of the only ones I can think of off the top of my head, at least in the South or on the East Coast, where they're still pretty hard-lined with no whites allowed. And that kind of transitions into or translates into like other cultures. But they kind of they'll bend the rules, here and there. But for the most part, yeah, they're only recruiting, black males or black females. And so if you have a UBN set in your city and they start taking off and recruiting, that's the population they're going to recruit from. You can go somewhere else in the country and have an entire outbreak of violence, and it can be mostly white males because that gang may not be necessarily hard-lined against other races, but one of their ranking members may be a white male, and he may be recruiting his friends and his cousins, and so it just spreads throughout maybe that little enclave in that city or whatever. So it just depends. And throughout the country, every city, the gangs kind of operate a little differently in the fact that you're recruiting people from that area. So a lot of the culture kind of comes across. So, the gangs that operate in the South operate probably a little differently than West Coast gangs or gangs up top in New York or whatever, or definitely different than Chicago. Like you can look at Chicago graffiti and it looks completely foreign to a lot of stuff in the South until someone from the Chicago area migrates down to the South and brings that style with them and starts to put up their gang graffiti up. And then you start looking at it and going, oh, that's more of a Chicago style, or that's more of West Coast or whatever.
Do gangs study police department structure and members the same way that police departments are studying them?
So, some gangs actually will do like intel, I guess you could say, on their – a very simple example is they know who works, what time, especially in like areas that are very active. So if you've got like an area of activity where there's always like certain gangs that they're posted up, they're going to know who drives vehicle, whatever number. They're going to know which officers are going to go out there and actually arrest people and do proactive work. They know the officers who are just trying to get through a shift. They know, and this is going to make a lot of people probably upset. Gang units, the trend used to be you have a gang unit that wears like BDUs or like a tactical uniform, and they have gang unit across their back. And that was a trend for a while. And a lot of people kind of realized very quickly, you're now letting the gang know how many people are in the unit, what shifts they work, because they watch and go, oh, wow, there's certain days of the week that the gang unit's not out here jumping out on people or not out here making arrests. Mm-hmm. So sometimes when departments start a gang unit, I always, if someone asks me my opinion, I say, hey, I would suggest keeping gang units, like, have the creativity to do whatever they need to do. If they need to be in plain clothes to get into a position to do surveillance, they should be plain clothes. If you want them to go out there and make arrests or be proactive, the best bet is have them in a uniform, the standard uniform that everybody else wears, only so that then your gang members or who you're trying to actually dismantle or disrupt that violence, they don't know who necessarily is arresting them. They just know it's a uniformed officer. But if you go out there and kind of broadcast gang unit across your back, you're kind of letting them know that. Not to mention, gang unit officer may have to fill in and go answer a call, or they may have to go make an arrest, and they arrest somebody's grandson who gets upset, and it may have nothing to do with the gang. It could be a kid that missed court, and sadly he's got a failure to appear warrant or something, and now you have someone with a gang unit uniform arresting them, and the whole neighborhood goes, oh my gosh, that whatever 19-year-old dude is in a gang, when in fact he may not be in a gang. So that can sometimes create complaints or problems that you have to answer. And that's just my 2 cents. And when I teach my classes and I say that, a lot of people kind of get upset because then they go into, hey, we need these types of uniforms or whatever. And I'm like, I got it. I'm just saying from my perspective and what I've seen, when you are in a uniform and you're part of a gang unit like that, but you're doing street work, you can kind of just blend in with the patrol. It doesn't draw attention. That's all I'm kind of saying. So if they're doing their intel and they're going, oh wow, gang unit only works whatever Tuesday through Friday, 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. Well, guess when a lot of the activity is going to shift? When the gang unit's not working.
Yep. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, working in a gang unit, what is the day-to-day like? Obviously, well, not obviously, but I've never been in a gang unit, so I wouldn't. I'm aware of different gang units in the area and kind of maybe a little bit of what they were doing. But what would you describe as sort of like the day-to-day of being in a gang unit versus being in normal patrol? Pluses, minuses on that.
Yeah. So the huge plus is most really successful gang units have the I guess the drive or the self-motivation. So they're usually directed by their own activities. So they may go out there and know that there's an apartment complex where there may be 15 to 20 treetop pyrus, posting up every day. So then they go, okay, what do we know about these guys? What do we know? And
would you call them treetop what?
Treetop Piru, Piru. It's just like it's a gang out of California, Los Angeles.
Oh, okay.
A lot of times they get
like a nickname of somebody spying on the top of a building.
No.
We used to roll in, we would roll into an apartment complex or something, and they would have young kids, like literally like 5-year-old kids, like yelling out and running around, telling everybody that the cops were.
So it was funny.
Or whatever.
I was actually gonna say that. I've got video on my phone. I don't know if I can. I probably can't share this video on our social media, but I'd like to. But I was doing surveillance on this female that was dealing drugs out of a car every morning, and her 6-year-old son, who was wearing all white shoes, white pants, white shirt, white flat brim hat, at 6 years old, was standing on the corner. And whenever a cop would come by, he would run back to his mom and let her know what's going on. And then she would go sit in the car for a little while. And then he would go stand back out. And then he would turn around and yell to her that it's all clear. And then she would make the deal. And so we actually, instead of doing 1 buy that day, we ended up doing like 6 buys on camera so that we could articulate the child abuse and the proof that she was using the child to crow out the police.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's it's the same probably technique used across the U.S.
Well, what's interesting was that the all white, which is what I learned from your course, that whenever you see somebody wearing a solid color, like Bloods are red, Crips are blue, but they might be wearing neon shoes for the day, and the neon shoes might indicate that they're dealing for the night, versus they might be wearing blue sneakers, which means they're taking a hit out for the night, and that you got to be careful like what colors. And so when he was wearing all white, kind of like, okay, maybe that's the signal for, the market's open.
Yeah. So, usually like all white or like a white bandana or white flag is what it's referred to. If that's on display with someone you see every day who's a blood, and these kind of wax and wane. Like some cities will see gang members wearing flags like every day, posted up, and then
Flags
all of a
are
sudden,
the bandanas.
I'm sorry, yeah. So the flags are the bandanas.
Okay.
So when you're referring it to it as a flag, gang members treat that bandana as if it's the colors. It's like as if it's the American flag.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not going to let it fall on the ground. They're not going to get it dirty, or they treat it with respect. So if every day they're posted up and they've got a red bandana folded in their pocket, if all of a sudden now one day they're in a different area and they're wearing a white bandana, usually that was like a white flag of peace. Like, hey, I'm a made man. Don't mess with me. I'm just rolling through this area. I don't want any beef. You know what I mean? Like a static. I'm just coming over here to visit somebody. So a lot of times that was just like the color that was used for like a neutral color, So when you're talking about like yelling out and stuff the way kids or like young teenagers do, like that's the old term. Like a lot of times you would hear people yelling one time. That meant like one officer. So you'd hear people like two times. Like so everybody know, hey, there are two cops in the area. So if you see one, there's another one floating around. Mm-hmm. So that's why a lot of times the old trend used to be you pile into a work van and roll into an area in a work van and then pile out of the work van when you're jumping out, because they can't give a heads up like, oh, there's one time, two times, like 10 people piled in the back of a van. But
too many times.
Yeah, honestly, it's you have to almost like overwhelm an area because the foot pursuits begin. So you want to be able to get the foot pursuits very quickly. You don't want it to continue on. So one of the things that a lot of, like for me, I didn't grow up riding a bike. Like I really didn't know how to ride a bike. I learned how to ride a bike. It got stolen. I picked up a skateboard and I moved on. But
you're like Creed from The Office when he wanted to do a cartwheel. He had never done one. He just never ridden a bike.
I never watched The Office either. So
of course, get him out of the studio. Hey,
I'm a loser.
Kick him out of the studio. This show's over.
So like, but bikes are like a phenomenal tool to use, and so I've actually, during briefings and stuff with informants, to explain to some units like, hey, if y'all are on a bike, we can't hear you when you approach, and if we take off running, you're just going to pedal faster. So, but like for me, I didn't like riding a bike because I was uncoordinated and
you had to wear those funny looking
and I had to wear shorts. But let me tell you about wearing shorts. You wear shorts and like ASIC, almost like running shoes. So when the foot pursuit begins, it feels like you're in an extra gear.
Man, I was on, because I work the pretty much the largest gang area in Raleigh, and I was always on my bike. Man, I was always on it, mainly because of your class and talking with the other gang guys. And so
but you had New
we
Balance.
loved it.
You had New Balance because you grilled a lot on shift too.
Yeah, I was the dad, the squad dad. But yeah, dude, I love it. I love foot chases with my bicycle.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So yeah. So
mainly the power
ride
slide.
my bike with no handlebars.
You got to get that power slide down.
I did used to watch a show called Pacific Blue, I think, but nobody knows that show, so it doesn't matter. I think it had AC Slater from Saved by the Bell.
Hell yeah, dude.
I'm almost positive that's who was in it.
It's a handsome dude.
I do respect the fact that you could name a character from Saved by the Bell. That's pretty epic, man.
Okay, so yeah, I've got a terrible like photographic memory for pop culture that I can't really use to make money. But pretty much anything before like 2000 is trapped in my brain. So.
Yeah, he knows like every single G.I. Joe character there is.
Oh, yeah.
That's intense.
Which is hilarious. And he knows like their backstories and everything. So like if you're talking to him, he's like, yeah, it's like, it's almost like Jungle Python. Remember the G.I. Joe that came out in 1991, Jungle Python, where his backstory was that, his dad was abusive and was a Marine, so he was never going to be a Marine. So he joined the Navy instead, but he still had the Marine blood in his name. Jungle Python. And you're like, no, dude, I don't know Jungle Python from 1991 G.I. Joe collection series.
Well, it would be like 1983 or 84 for me. there were like 5 characters back then, but that's pretty much why everybody I think joined the Army back then was because G.I. Joe was like so intense in like the mid 80s. But back to the
Here we go.
but like back to the Scout though, like when you see that trend though, that also lets you know how active that area is. So really like a brand new patrol officer who should be riding around with their windows down, their little laptops closed, like just taking in the sights, the smells, and sometimes just let that vehicle just kind of roll into a neighborhood or to an area, just kind of troll in where you're not revving the engine or, you know what I mean? Like really good drug dealers and really good gang members, a couple years ago when the Crown Vic was big, they could tell you a Crown Vic engine.
Dang.
When it comes into that area.
We all could. The whole world
Right?
could.
Yeah. So
I miss those things.
Yeah, you're
It's like the Vietnamese and like Huey helicopters. So like,
right. Yeah. You see certain sounds like when you're out there every day. So I would tell like new officers, go ahead and close that computer, roll the windows down, and just kind of roll into the area and surveil it. Just like watch what happens when you get into the area. Like you noticed a young man took off running, right? Mm-hmm. So a newer officer can get into an area and go, wow, every time I roll in there, they're yelling one time or whatever it is. Man down used to be the big one, it'd be like man down, man down. So for a new officer, they would go, I don't know what that means. So then a senior officer can explain, yeah, that means you got drug dealers out there and they're already giving you the heads up. So you're not going to see where they are when you come in that car. Now, if a drug area, if people react that way, set up your surveillance and then call in a patrol unit to roll by to see who runs and where they run to. And then you know where your stash is, you know who the scouts are, you know who's actually just going to a corner store to buy something and who's actually selling. So you can use that to your advantage to get a patrol unit into the area to see how people react to a known presence of.
See, now this makes me want to go back on the job and just try to get into a gang unit because that sounds fun, man.
It is by far one of the greatest assignments you can have. And also because if you have a really good squad, and so like for at least from my experience, everyone's like highly intelligent and very self-motivated and very team-oriented. So you would just find a task and basically everybody will work towards it. So you find your strengths. Someone may be really, really good at surveillance. That person's going to do surveillance. Everybody else is going to run support positions or takedown units or debrief units. So you may have, like you said earlier, you watch someone sell. Instead of jumping that person, make one sell, you watch multiple sells. So now they have multiple felonies and you've documented the fact that the kid's involved in it. So then with a gang unit, if you had a couple of people doing that, selling, someone does the takedown, they take them back to an office, and you start building that rapport or you do that interview with them, and they may actually provide really good information. But at that time, your team can still be out there making arrests, doing surveillance, and someone else is doing the debrief and maybe even flipping that person who says, hey, I don't know why y'all are messing with us when, there's a set of Bloodstone villains across, the city or whatever, and they did whatever murder or whatever, they just start throwing out information. So a really good gang unit, everybody kind of knows their role, and they're actually motivated in the fact that they can go in there and you can change an entire area. Like you don't have to just have a drug area. Now, when I say that, I'm sure people in larger cities are probably screaming at the computer or whatever. But like at least in the South, like you've got cities where certain areas get really hot and you start having a lot of shootings and a lot of murders in very small areas. You can go in there and actually disrupt that violence. You just have to allow a unit that can create, strategies and go in there and do it. Give them the time and the freedom to do it, and then back them up when they go in.
So the cool thing is when I took your class, and of course the department that I worked for really took your class to heart, right? Like you taught, you pretty much taught every session of that department going forward. And I could tell that when I worked on special assignment for the better half of a year with the gang unit in Raleigh, I thought the way that you guys do the intel thing and the manipulation of things, and like what you're saying is when it's really hot and there's a lot of really big shootings and things are going on, that you guys can literally go in there and intelligently, not like undercover, grow your beard out, infiltrate the gang. No, but you guys were like, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to listen to jail audio. And then we're going to see where this void of power is. And there's a struggle in power. And then we're going to pull this guy out who's snitching on so-and-so. And then he can kind of let us know like, hey, there's a power void. And this guy, these three guys are trying to get in charge. And they're just going to keep killing people until one of them gets in there. And so then you'll say, well, which one's the best out of the three? Let's go arrest the other two and get them off the street. And then this guy doesn't have to compete by killing people. And you're like, whoa, that's brilliant. So we can just go, put the pressure on two dudes, get those two guys locked up. And that way this third guy, who's probably the least violent of all of them, can go ahead and take power. And that we don't have this race to see who can kill as many people as possible to get promoted or stealing it from 37 cars in the middle of the night or something.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's applicable to any certain crime. But when you're dealing with an organization, that if you can learn the ins and outs, learn the drama, learn who's pushing for rank, how they're doing it, so there was a set at one time that their sales pitch was basically, we're going to have every set flip under us, meaning like there are already existing blood sets out there, but they wanted to like fold them into their set, right? And they were going to give them a very friendly sales pitch and just say, hey, why don't you join our set? And these are the pros and cons. But the contingency plan was when these 2 or 3 sets say, no, we're not going to flip under y'all, then it was going to be complete violence. It's like, hey, we just like basically they're on the table then. So when they deny our offer, our peace offering, they're going to be X'd out. So if you know ahead of time that that's going to happen, a really good gang unit can then disrupt that. And the only way you get to that is that intel, like you said. So jail phone calls, informants. I mean, a lot of it is just constantly gathering information and intel from your own city and from local jurisdictions around there. So especially for like larger cities in the South, you have urban sprawl. So you have all of these suburbs and these other agencies that have a spike in violence because a large city, the city department, may get really smart and push out a lot of that activity or start making a lot of arrests where gangs will say, oh, wow, we need to fall back and go hang out in a smaller city because they have less officers. So then you may have a small agency get inundated with a lot of violence very quickly. So if you have like monthly meetings or regional meetings where different agencies are sitting down and sharing information, the smaller agency may be like, well, we don't know who these shooters are. We only have them on video maybe from, like I said earlier, like a gas station or apartment complex or whatever. But the gang unit from the larger city may be able to sit down and say, yeah, every one of these guys, I know exactly who they are. This is their government name. This is their alias. This is their gang name. This is their girlfriend, grandmother, like the whole background on them to help that agency solve that crime or their crime spree. Conversely, you can also have a smaller agency have a really squared away officer, sometimes just by themselves, or even a unit, but they have all this intel and can actually help a larger agency. So really good cops and really good gang units don't have an ego. There's none of this big city versus small city or feds versus local agency. It's like we're all on the same boat, share information, and let's go to work.
One of the questions I see here in the comments is, and I think it would be cool to address it, is that somebody said that today gangs are nothing and it's all for show. And then the other one says hunting gangs for drugs, etc., is irrelevant. Why are we bothering them? Basically, are there bigger and better issues than just gangs selling drugs, and why are we fucking with them?
Yeah, so you would use the drug charges on gang members to actually try to curb the violence or to disrupt.
Because it's not just
itself.
about drugs. We're not hunting gangs because they're selling dope, right?
Right,
You're hunting
no.
gangs because they're doing lots of other extracurricular activity.
Yeah, I mean, at the root cause of everything, and we're in an era right now where...
Do you believe that the root cause is drugs, though? Do you think that gangs started
no.
because they wanted to sell drugs alone?
No. What I'm saying is like the root cause is one human being hates another human being for whatever reason. It can be over a girl. I mean, like some of the worst gang violence can start out with just two people not liking each other. They just happen to be gang members and they happen to have 20 other gang member friends that can now back them up. So the drug charges should be used anyway, drug arrest, to disrupt cycles of violence. It's kind of like you've got all these people in the landscape, and if you can remove certain people that are really violent through drug charges, then the violence de-escalates, right? So when a lot of times people will say, well, gangs aren't bad. They do a lot of really good things. They do a lot of charitable, events. Okay, that's cool. But the violence, most cities can tell you, their violence is driven by gangs. So if you're not focusing on gangs and you're not working gangs, you've probably got a high violence or high murder rate. Well, yeah.
Like they don't fuck with their gangs, and
well, I don't know. I'm not a Chicago cop. I don't know what they've got going up there. They've got a much larger problem. I mean, you can track back for over 100 years back to the mob violence and that sort of thing, in the 20s and 30s. But for any police agency, if they don't make gangs a priority on some level, you could probably see a strong correlation between their gun violence or their violent crimes escalating or spiking. And the less proactive, then that's your correlation. The more focused, proactive you have or invest in a really good gang unit or 2 gang units, or like some cities will have gang unit street level. Then you've got investigative units, so they're usually like detectives. They're the plainclothes guys you're talking about, or plainclothes detectives. And they'll focus on longer term cases. So they may work a drug case for 3 months, but the person they're picking off is calling the shots. So they may be actually giving orders for murders, or they may be giving orders for shootings. So, yeah.
Right. And I know one of the bigger cases that I ever got to work on a street level had nothing to do with drugs, but it had everything to do with just being in a gang. And it was literally a rival set had broke into a series or had done a series of strong arms in an area. And this other gang set was like, yo, you just stole a bunch of wallets in our area. And they put a thing out on social media. And so it was a 13-year-old and an 18-year-old, and they drove this car back to this house to meet behind a shed and give them a stack of wallets that they had stolen under truce, like under a treaty. Like, hey, we're coming to give you the wallets that we stole, not from you guys, but just from the area that you guys control, and we're giving you back the wallets. And they gave back the wallets, and it was no dice. They blew the 13-year-old's head off with an AK-47, literally split the head in half, which made the brain exit the skull. And then the other guy was able to kind of get away unscathed. But that whole thing was because this one gang set, or these 2 kids, were stealing wallets, strong-arming folks in their area.
Yeah, so
nothing to do with drugs.
So a lot of times so we say drugs just because that's kind of what's out in the open. You look at frauds right now, and gangs are tapping into frauds and making millions. So a lot of guys even transition and say, "Why am I going to sit around packaging up heroin or crack or Molly or what? Like, I'm not even going to sell that. I can go and work fraud and make 6 figures." While you fools are still sitting here spitting 20s or whatever to passing cars. So you see a younger generation that doesn't want to necessarily work at it in and out of hotels or do the drug game. They're getting into frauds.
The Bloods
very
are
quickly.
diversifying their crypto funds.
So well, that's true. So like anything, like criminal organizations, the ones who don't evolve or don't adapt, they basically fall by the wayside, right? Like, we're still talking about Bloods and Crips and all these other gangs, Gangster Disciples, Latin Kings, like everybody's just spreading out of their cities of origin, and the problem hasn't gone away. It just keeps increasing, and it does that. The gang itself will adapt, will change.
BC, you brought up something about gangs doing charity, and somebody in the comments too is like, I've never seen a gang charity event. So what when you say like they do good things in the community,
they give out like
charity,
turkeys and shit on Thanksgiving.
What do they do? Yeah. Like, are they trying to kind of like be Don Corleone and just like treat everybody in the neighborhood really, really good and win their good graces? Or
pretty much. I mean, so if you think about it, some of the older gang members grew up hearing a term called hearts and minds, right? So out of Vietnam, you hear a lot of people say, "Oh, you got to win the hearts and minds of people," right? And then you watch The Godfather and you go, "Oh, wow, he had loyalty because he took care of people, but he on the other hand took care of people as well. Like, people feared him."
Yeah.
So there are gangs out there that will do charity events, and they will wear, just like business attire. They'll wear like casual attire. They'll go out there. They'll hand out Christmas gifts, or they'll hand out maybe like a backpack drive or whatever. And so a lot of people are like, "Oh, they do that basically because they want to manipulate the population," sort of. But I mean, I think that people have to understand that when we're talking about gang members, we're not talking about robots the same way cops aren't robots. We're talking about human beings. So I've met plenty of gang members that actually have a really good heart. They don't want to do a lot of stupid stuff. They don't even really like a lot of violence. They're just in the gang. They're friends with everybody. They're not the ones that'll pull the trigger, so to speak, and even the gang knows that. So a lot of times they're the ones who may organize something like that and say, "Hey, we need to do something and give back." Like, we're always talking about, we're about the community. Well, let's give back and let's do that. So when you can just kind of look at it on that aspect, it is a legit thing that happens, and you can YouTube it. I mean, there's plenty of events that.
I mean, like, I remember in Raleigh in particular, where I worked, there was a set of apartment complexes kind of out near Raleigh North, and a bunch of teenagers went out there one time, gang members, and they were making hot dogs. And it was a grass lot that had been cleared. I think they may have put a park there now, but there wasn't a park. But the lot had been cleared. For whatever reason, these guys came out with a big grill, and they just started. They were handing out free hot dogs and free hamburgers. One of the neighbors had complained to us about people selling hamburgers and hot dogs without a permit. And I ended up walking over there and recognizing two of the guys behind the grill as being pretty big gang members in our area. And I said, "Are you guys selling hamburgers and hot dogs?" He's like, "No, man, we just out here handing out hot dogs and hamburgers to the public." Well, 3 or 4 months down the road, you get in a foot chase with one of those guys or one of the people that affiliate with those guys. Now the whole community's like, man, these guys were out just making us hamburgers. Now he's hiding in my house. I ain't going to tell the cops shit.
Yeah, you're right.
Because it is very simple over there in that area. There's not a lot of money.
Well, yeah, so you're right. So if someone is showing love or attention to a community, then the community's going to be like, well, they're not that bad. So, I mean, that makes sense. I look at it too from the aspect, like you said, like a foot pursuit. So a lot of times if someone is getting in a foot pursuit, they make an arrest, and there's already a crowd starting to form, some people are going to get mad, but someone's got to be able to explain to the crowd forming like what is going on. Not necessarily crossing the line and telling people about an ongoing investigation or something, but they have to kind of explain the actions. So like a long time ago, a really good example was a kid had a gun in his waistband. And we were doing basically like a really loose surveillance at the dead end of this area where we knew a bunch of guys were hanging out that were in a gang. So as we're watching it, we watched this one kid just keep coming back and forth from the back of this house. He's not interacting with anyone in the house party, and he's not talking to anyone in the driveway. He just keeps bouncing back and forth from the shadows. We're watching him. We see him touch his waistband numerous times. We know that's an indicator of an armed citizen, right? So we go ahead, we roll in, we do the encounter, and he starts bucking up and trying to grab the gun from his waistband. Because our unit was large enough, we had the overwhelming presence. We controlled his hands, got the gun out of his waistband, but the crowd started forming coming out of the party, and people were yelling and screaming at us about fighting with this guy on top of the car and onto the driveway. And then I went over and just explained to them once we get the gun, get him in custody, like, hey, does anybody want to vouch for this guy? Because we just pulled a gun out of his waistband, and here's the gun, and showed him the gun. The entire party was like, we don't know that dude. We don't know why he's here, and thank you for getting that gun off of him. So we don't know why he was there. He came from another jurisdiction. We couldn't track down anyone in the area that he was linked to. Now, my logic would be he was probably going to rob somebody coming out of that party maybe, and the people in the party realized that very quickly when they didn't recognize him, and we pull a gun out of his waistband. So the whole idea is that if sometimes you can explain the actions there on the scene and it makes sense, then the crowd kind of realizes, okay, no wonder they were fighting. And one of the things I said was, hey, that guy was reaching for a gun. We knew he had a gun, and yet we didn't shoot him. We didn't even tase him. Like, we controlled his arms because we were on top of him. I'm not saying that's the same in every scenario. I'm just simply saying explain those actions and sometimes explain when you go above and beyond. And then people realize, like, oh, wow, because they went from screaming and yelling and it was getting crazy to, yeah, thank you, officers. We're glad y'all are down here, as a matter of fact. And then they start talking about,
you want to come in for some wings?
Well, they were just,
you want to hit the beer bong one time, brother?
Yeah, I mean, so then they just started giving us drama from the neighborhood, like, hey, we're older folks. I mean, they were in like their mid-20s, but to them it was like, hey, we're not young kids, running around. So, yeah.
Switching gears, I got a question. What are you talked about earlier, you mentioned laces. Their laces might be tied a certain way, or they might be wearing certain types of clothing that could be indicators of things. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, and it, like I said earlier, man, it'll come and go. So I've taught classes and people will say, well, they don't wear bandanas anymore. They don't wear flags. Well, give it another 4 or 5 years. It'll come back. So, I mean, there was a trend because schools had cracked down so hard on clothing attire because gang members were wearing certain jerseys, or even some of them were bold enough to wear their flags in their pockets or beads, right? Mm-hmm. Around their neck. So in the schools, I'd go in and teach the principals and the staff, hey, these are some of the indicators you're probably seeing. These are gang members, and teach some of the school resource officers. When they cracked down on that, then gang members switched it up and were like, okay, well, like for one gang specifically, they were 9 Trey Bloods, right? So 3s are always popping up and 9s in their terminology or their symbols and stuff. So they would actually only lace their shoes up in the 3 different eyelets, right, or whatever you call it, like the holes, right?
Yeah.
So you could look at their shoes and be like, that's kind of kooky, but that's what it is. Or even like some dudes were starting to put like slash marks in their eyebrows, like in the 80s when that was real big with like Kwame and stuff like that. Like these young kids started doing it and bringing it back. And you would look at it and be like, oh, wow, that like one dude I'm looking at, I've got one slash in one eyebrow and 3 in the other. So you put 1 and 3 together, you got 13. So he was like a Sereno, like a TCS 13 gang member or a BPA 13, right? So he was one of the Sereno sets attached to 13. So it's like all these small things that they can do to kind of show everybody else, hey, I'm in a gang, but the average officer or adult would completely miss that.
Right, and so the beads, same way, it could be blue and white, and they could have like 3 white beads and then, whatever.
Yeah.
6
so,
blue beads, and that would mean that they're
right. So
whatever.
Yeah. So basically, what I'm saying is a shoestring and some beads on there in the different combinations. So, like you heard me mention earlier, like 8 tray, right? So that's 8 and 3. So you may see 8 black beads or 8 blue beads, right? But usually you'll see like a blue and black combo, and it's just a combination like 8 beads, 3 beads, 8 beads, 3 beads, and it's just something simple like that they may wear around their neck.
Yeah,
and that may be something very specific to the South. People in other cities or other areas, they may not experience that. I don't know, but it's very huge out here. And like I said, it'll come and go. Like certain gangs will wear it all the time, or maybe like newer members will have to wear it for a while. And then as they get a little older or they get some rank, they don't necessarily want to wear it. They don't want to have that that bullseye on their back, so to speak. But when they're like young soldiers or they're like young guys that got to put in work, they have to be out there showing that in a sense, like especially if it's an area of activity where they're out there every day. It's like, hey, have your beads on or have your flag on so that everybody knows we still control this area or we're still in this area.
What do you think the big difference is? And maybe you don't have a lot of experience on the stereotypical mafia side, but it seems to me from a basic education about this kind of thing, or my perceptions is that at least early on, the mafia wasn't about drug trade. Now, I think that's probably different these days in criminal families or whatever, but a lot of it was about protection money. Do gangs, at least in your experience, are they connected to the community in a way that's sort of like the cover, or is it all internal about their own profit and they just kind of front these charity things on the human side, or do they actually like cover territory in a way that's like, hey, that's our barbershop, that's our hamburger joint, this is our little market, whatever it is, like, and if that place gets robbed, then we're after them, we're protecting these areas of the community, or is it more about just their own profit through drug trade or other illegal activities?
Yeah, most of the trend has just, because it's still in its sort of infancy. You're looking in the South at like 20 years maybe. The gangs are 25 years maybe, really. So they haven't adapted to that maybe the way other gangs have, or like you said earlier, like certain crime families or whatever, they may control a certain area and get that protection money. Sadly, if you teach a gang that, they may adapt to it. You know what I mean? So, and a lot of times, like some cities will see these trends where all of a sudden a set will pop up and they'll start to control a certain area, and you'll see them there every day, right? And then all of a sudden they kind of dissipate or disappear, whatever. And then you start seeing them popping up in hotels, right? So then they start taking over hotels. It's almost very nomadic, and probably because everybody's on a smartphone now. So you could have a whole customer base on a burner phone, and just, you could say, like, if drugs your thing, you're like, hey, I got re-upped. I'll be in hotel this at this room number. Hit me up, when you're ready. And then that person could literally have 20 customers, coming in and out of that hotel and making that money. And then boom, they're gone out of the hotel. Mm-hmm. So they don't have a fixed location that you can do constant projects on or whatever. And that's probably from years of learning from discovery in their own cases where our techniques are used, and they learn and adapt from those techniques and then go, okay, hey, what can we do? Because some of the hotels, they'll go in and actually flip the staff. So if you've got like a really I guess like a rundown hotel, or a hotel that someone's not really taking care of, they'll come in and they can make friends with, say, a clerk, and they'll manipulate the clerk and basically be like, well, what's your drug of choice? Or sadly, some clerks may want just like tricks from prostitutes. So you may have a gang member who comes in and says, okay, let me get a hotel room off the books. I'm not putting my name on or anything. You just give me the key to the room, and I got a girl who will do whatever you want, right? So it's like a room for exchange for sex. Now they got a room that's not even documented. They can operate out of that room for, say, a day, maybe a day and a half, 2 days. And then they're gone to another hotel. But then within their set, they may be able to say, hey, this dude here works whatever, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. He's good with us. He likes tricks or whatever. Or, hey, maybe he likes Molly or he likes Coke. Throw him a bag, and he'll hook you up with a room. So we start seeing a lot of that activity in these hotels. And you would actually have multiple gangs operating out of a hotel and never having any violence, because one dude may be selling Coke. 3 doors down, you could have another gang selling heroin or whatever. So you're not really taking food off of anybody's plate. Now, once you start selling the same product, or you start tapping into their customer base, then we would have some infighting. Or you may go, there may be some fallout from a club. Everybody comes back to the hotel, and then someone says, hey, that's so-and-so from that set, and then you get in hotel rooms shot up, or people shot and stabbed in parking lots and stuff. So I'm sure a lot of cities are experiencing the same thing, where it becomes really nomadic. It's not as hard line necessarily as it used to be, maybe.
With that kind of adaptation, how let's say that you've talked about like that migration south or into the South with organized gangs, at least very organized down to loose. But if you are, let's say that you're kind of like a small to medium-sized department or whatever, and you are getting information from neighboring jurisdictions, how there's information sharing among law enforcement organizations and things like that, and gangs are moving in a certain direction. How can a police department in coordination with their community or otherwise make themselves a hard target, I guess, to prevent the infiltration of the reverse, right? Instead of infiltrating the gangs, they're infiltrating you. So how can you make yourselves a hard target if you don't have a gang problem yet and you want to keep it that way?
I don't have the answer to that.
I mean, on the street level side of it, I remember one of the big things that you talk about, the broken window theory. If there's a broken window, you fix it, right? If there's spray paint, you cover it. Yeah. If there's somebody begging on the side of the street, you get rid of them. And if you don't, it leads to bigger problems. And I know that those are crimes that the group that I ran with in the department, we would kind of make fun of other cops for those smaller type, infraction, like hunting infractions, like, oh, you gave so-and-so a open container violation. Whoa, that was a great charge. And you would get shamed for it in the locker room. But if you didn't do those kind of things, next thing you know, you got 2 or 3 dudes drinking a beer at the corner, and then that turns into 4 or 5 dudes at the corner, and they're all older guys. And then you got the younger guy that's like, man, there's 4 or 5 drunks that hang out at this thing. I'm gonna go in there and sell them drugs because they're drunk as shit on the corner. Now you got the bums that are getting crack from the local dude, and then other people are like, oh man, so-and-so's selling crack to these dudes, and we're with, 8 Trey, and we're gonna come down here and be like, nah, bitch, this is now our corner, and we're selling drugs here. And then it gets to be a big problem. And we saw that in the end of my career, after the George Floyd type things were happening and the Ferguson things, where the departments were cracking down on enforcing these lesser crimes. Next thing you know, you have a bus stop area that was never a problem. And then right before I leave law enforcement, that bus stop was the biggest problem. And it all started out like that. It's one dude being able to drink and nobody harassing him on that beat. So now 3 dudes drink there, and then 4 dudes drink there, and then 1 kid goes and sells them drugs. And then now you got a whole gang operating on.
Yeah. So 2 parts. You're exactly right. That would be more of hardening an area for a gang to commit a crime. I apologize. I thought your long question you asked me was,
ouch.
I just messing with you. No, so I thought like your question was more of how do you keep people from joining that gang as it's spreading, like, and that's what I was going to say.
I'm thinking like in a jurisdiction, if you know if you know a couple doors down as far as police jurisdictions go that they're having issues. How do you kind of rally the troops from a police perspective and say, all right, here's what we need to be doing right now to prevent them, make ourselves a hard target for the infiltration? It
seems like to me too that the gang members love homeless people. Like that's their target. Yeah. So the more homeless you have, the more gang members you're going to have, because that's their demographic right there. That's who they're selling fake crack to.
Right. So and Tanzi's right. Like so if you can start enforcing smaller charges and showing, hey, you can hang out here, you can trespass here, but you're going to get arrested or get charged. Then the message is, well, I can't stand there all day. Like I can't just hang out at the bus stop all day and sell. Like I'm going to get stopped, or I'm going to get talked to by the police, or somehow I'm going to get on their radar. So it is that, like, if you know, so if a larger city puts out information that says, hey, we now have, whatever, like Spanish gangster disciples are operating here now, and this is what we're seeing, they can put that information out. And it may be something like, hey, you're going to see this type of graffiti or this type of activity to other smaller surrounding agencies. Then when they start to see that graffiti pop up, then they may say, hey, I remember in that last meeting you talked about, Spanish gangster disciples. We've got this graffiti here. It's right beside the city park. Okay, well, then you're probably going to have them operating in that park. So then whatever proactive units you have, focus on that park before it gets out of hand, right? So like Tansy was saying, if a department removes that, or if this common trend of less proactive policing, that's the result.
Which is the result of defunding police. Am I wrong? Because a lot of the first things they went after with this whole defund the police was quality of life infractions. They took the trespassing signs out of the parks, so that now you can't charge somebody with trespassing after hours.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's just like this. I use this analogy and people get upset, but it's kind of like carpet bombing, right? Like you can go in and just carpet bomb an area and you probably will kill whoever the enemy is, but you're probably going to kill a lot of innocent citizens as well, right? If you go in and write every violation you see, you're going to charge people with stuff, and they're actually working, and they're like normal society. They don't, you know what I mean? It's like if someone is trespassing, right? And you write 20 charges that night in a park for trespassing, but none of those people are gang members or drug dealers or involved in anything criminal or violent. It just happens to be there hanging out in a park, you can say, oh, wow, we wrote these 20 charges. Man, we did all this work. And you don't have a shooting that night, and someone goes, oh, yes, because you were out there writing tickets. True, but could you also have a presence without writing so many tickets? Right. Because those 20 people, you'll hear about it at a later encounter. Like when I was a assault detective, I used to get a lot of really good information out of people, and then all of a sudden it was like about 6 months, 8 months, people stopped talking, and then eventually I just started saying, well, why are you so mad? Like, what is it that you hate about who I am or what I'm working for or whatever? And that's what they were saying. It was like one person showed me they had been charged like 4 different things in a traffic stop, very minor things. And she was saying, I now have these 4 pending charges. I have to go to court. I have to take care of this. I got 3 kids. So she's telling me all this stuff. She's like, why am I getting this ticket when I live in the neighborhood where the murders are occurring, where a shot house is operating, where someone's selling drinks by the shot and people are selling crack out of the back door. Like, I've worked all my life. Now I've got all these charges I've got to take care of, and I've got to go to court, and I've got to pay these fines. And yet you all can't do something about this house across the street. So it was like, okay, the pendulum needs to shift. So I'm not a big proponent of numbers across the board. I don't like just charges for the sake of charges. What you're talking about, though, is very specific. Like, hey, you go in there and use the small charges to send a message of, you're not going to basically tear up this bus stop, or you're not going to loiter at this bus stop.
Right. So like what you're saying is you see the guy that's got the open container at the bus stop. You don't just go in there necessarily and have to write that guy a ticket, but you make it very clear. Hey, homie, you're not going to drink here at this bus stop. Give me your can of beer, pour it out, and hit the road. And that enough is the guy's like, all right, that's actually cool.
Right.
All he did was jump my beer out and didn't charge me. Yeah, I am going to go away. Versus like you dump his beer and you charge him, then he's not going to go to court, and he's got an FTA, then he's got 6 FTAs, then he doesn't give a fuck. He'll drink wherever the fuck he wants. Because he's like, yeah, dude, fucking all you're going to do is give me a court date, and I'm not going to go, and you ain't going to do shit about it because none of the cops here have time to deal with a bullshit, open container FTA. I'll fucking sit here and drink beer at the same goddamn bus stop all I want, and I'm going to buy crack from Joe Schmuckatelli.
Right, yeah. Or like you said, you go up there and talk to him. And you pour it out, and you explain to them, like, look, don't get caught up in the net, because dudes that are coming by here are going to start catching charges. Like, I don't want to charge you, so I'm going to pour it out because I got to do something here. Like, you just can't sit here drinking. However, the next time you get encountered or whatever, if you got some info, pass it that way, right? You know what I mean? Like, you almost like like priming the pump, or like you're explaining to them, hey, we always want information, right? Like I've got this open container in this hand. I really don't want to deal with this right now. I would like to find a gun out here.
Yeah.
And the person may say, look, whatever, kid just walked by, adjusting his waistband, says he's going to go smoke somebody or whatever it is. Okay, who's that kid? Oh, that's so-and-so that stays at this house. So you can follow up on it. If it cashes out, like, cool, we got a gun off of a guy over not writing a violation. Or either way, it's a small misdemeanor. Follow up on that info and see. I mean, we work in gangs, you literally will have marijuana in one hand, like a weed charge, right? Like I got a simple misdemeanor charge of weed in one hand. I would really love to have a gun in the other. And people will say, oh, I'll tell you right now where one is. So it's like one of those ideas.
Snitches get riches.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's self-preservation. Like, what are you going to do? Like, if you're the guy drinking the open container, like, you're going to be like, no, I don't want to talk and take me to jail or give me a ticket. Or they may be like, yeah, cool, this is what's going on. They'll give you a little bit of info.
Yeah.
But the idea, like you said, is now you don't really create an enemy, but you give them a heads up. Hey, like, this is what's coming down the line. Like, you're going to see people when they post up here and sell, or when they start hanging out here or spray painting the power box or whatever, like, people are going to be starting going to jail. And don't depend on just seeing a patrol car. Like, if you don't see anyone around, you're probably being watched. Like, you can tell people, like, hey, you're probably getting watched, so don't come showing up here.
Well, I used to do that a lot too, and there was actually, we did have a pole camera set up in one area watching this one house, and I was had some guys detained, and they were like, yo, we know that there's a pole camera and it's right there. And I was like, oh shit, there's one right. I mean, like, I knew there was one right over here.
Right, yeah.
You think there's one there too? And I was like, oh shit, there is a bird box up there.
Right.
Damn, I didn't even know. Like, who has access to that camera? That might be, and I was, and I literally said, I was like, I'll be honest with you, that bird box right there, that is a camera. That one over there, that's not ours. I don't know who the fuck that is. And then there was like a rumor running around the streets, like, yo, the feds is watching us, man. The feds is watching us. Cause that cop didn't even know,
Yeah.
Of course I knew both bird boxes were ours, but.
Well, yeah, no. So it's that idea of trying to disrupt any kind of just constant activity you have in an area. So that's the main thing. Like, if gangs are nomadic, people will go, oh, that's terrible. Yeah, it is, sort of. But it's also better because you don't have citizens having to experience that day in and day out. There are neighborhoods where families have worked all their lives, retired, their house is paid off, and they can't even sell the house because the property value's gone down because one or two houses in the whole neighborhood are infested with gang members, and they're in the front yard hanging out and selling and shooting guns and just doing whatever, just going buck wild, doing whatever they want to do.
Before we move on, I do, because I know we got to wrap this up. I could literally talk to you all day long. Can we switch gears to motorcycle clubs for a moment? There's been a lot of questions and comments in the comment thread here about MCs and how those are operating through the. What is wrong with you? That there is. Sorry,
I had a stray dog in the studio.
Crawled
it's
behind
just
me.
Jimmy.
Here.
I thought he was doing push-ups. I was like, man, he was pretty motivated.
Oh, looks like maybe my computer might be going to die, so he's saving my ass. But
gotta screenshot
that. The motorcycle club thing.
Yeah.
We know that there's a lot of movement. There's an uptick in motorcycle clubs. Do you have any reasons for that? Is it boredom? Is it COVID? People are, oh, I don't have to go to work right now. I'm working from home. Let me buy a motorcycle and, just wanted to be a.
Yeah. No, it is.
Is it because the movie Wild Hogs came out?
Goes to the motorcycle dealer. Yeah, man, I just been feeling like being an MC is like the next step in my life. Which one do you recommend?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a phenomenon for the South, definitely. Just like with gangs. I mean, like you had like certain clubs that have been in the South for a very long time, and then you had clubs that were never here. But now you're seeing an influx of multiple 1%er clubs, right? Or what would, in law enforcement, they would be focused on what they would call like the criminal motorcycle clubs, right?
Right.
So they kind of self-identify as 1%ers, meaning 1% of the motorcycle riding population, lives an outlaw lifestyle. The other 99% are just riding and following the rules. They're just enjoying a motorcycle. So they self-identify as a 1%er. So you may hear people throw that term out, and sometimes like on the jackets or the cuts, they'll have like a patch with a little diamond or whatever, but it'll have like a 1 and then a % sign on it. And like I said, that's kind of self-identifying. That's what they're wearing on their jacket.
It's really funny because I was having bike nights at my distillery, and you had called me and mentioned that there was some movement going on in our area and that I should be very careful with our bike nights. And I heeded your information, and I stopped having bike night. And then the restaurant down the road started hosting my bike night at their place. And within 2 weeks, they had four people shot in the parking lot. And it was literally over the gang rival, the MC rivals, that you literally called me and said, hey, you live in this really small town. I get it. But I do have really good intel that you guys are in like the middle between, I think we were between Myrtle Beach and the hub of Raleigh or DC or whatever it was that you told me. And you were like, for whatever reason, they're pulling off of 95 and camping out really close to your town. And your bike nights are on the list of things to do.
Yeah, and that's one of those things too. Like we were talking about earlier, if businesses or organizations are armed with information and go, I'm not aware of that, then they can act on it. So you have an expansion of large nations, right? Large 1%er clubs opening up chapters all over the South. So I was at a conference and talking to some guys in other agencies, and it's like the big red dot for the South right now is like, when I say your area, like North Carolina, the Piedmont area or the central area there, of just multiple chapters opening up. And I don't know exactly why that is. I mean, you can have one person want to move to an area and they're already in an organization.
Do you think it's just because like California is so fucked up right now in Washington that they're like, you know what, let's go to North Carolina.
Well,
I don't like the politics here in California, and then we seem to. The only thing we're missing in North Carolina is the motorcycle gangs.
Yeah,
because that used to be a very West Coast thing, but now it's very. Like, I mean, I'm seeing it all the time. I was at a charity golf competition, and one of the holes, they were sponsored by different people. One of the holes literally had a dude with a ball peen hammer and a vest, dressed in all golf attire, wearing his fucking MC cut in full golf. It was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. I called him out for it. I was like, wait, you got a ball peen hammer? And he goes, I'm friends of, but not supporters of. And I was like, but that's the most fucked up thing. I was like, does the Hells Angels know that you're saying that you're friends of, but not supporters of, but you're wearing their ball peen hammer? That seems a little bit ludicrous. I embarrassed him in front of 25 people.
Yeah, it's interesting because
that was the beginning of the end for Eric.
Yeah, then I got Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, so that's the thing too. Is like just like I mentioned earlier with street gangs or whatever term you want to use, like Bloods, Crips, and all these other gangs, is you could have someone literally who makes 6 figures a year join an MC, and then you can have a guy who's a 20-time felon join. I mean, people from different diverse backgrounds. So.
It's kind of like our audience at Fair to Stop. We have
it's like
20 time
the movie
and...
Shot Caller, where you're just a normal white collar dude who ends up rising in the ranks of a white supremacist gang inside prison.
What was that one again?
Shot Caller, the movie on Netflix.
Yeah.
That I'm sure you haven't seen, but you need to
check it out. I'll put it on my list.
It's not really that great, to be honest with you.
What?
I didn't think it was a great movie. I watched it. I was actually working in the crime reporting center when I was injured, and I watched it in there.
So when you say it's good, do you think like a guy like me would enjoy it just because you're saying the prison thing? Where he goes
I've been recommending it to everybody because I just think it's a good movie. It's a cool story. It keeps you engaged, and I think it's well filmed and acted. Yeah. I just liked it in general, but it's about white supremacist gang.
Yeah, he moves all the way to the top.
Yeah, well, I was going to say too that when people go to prison, they kind of self-segregate. So you do start to have prison gangs that are all drawn like by racial boundaries. And then guys get out and they're kind of like, yeah, I did that while I was in because that was survival, but yeah, I don't think that way. You know what I mean? Or whatever. So it's kind of, once again, it's like self-preservation. But I'll check it out because
Before you go, what is your favorite gang-related movie?
Ooh.
That's like the most real.
Okay, so when we're talking about like technically gangs, obviously it's going to be Colors, but that's because I'm old and most people.
Yeah, that's that 90s vibe, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's my thing. Like when I first saw it was before I ever became a cop, and I was a kid when it came out. But I was just kind of fascinated with like, this is a whole world where this goes on. And like Hodges, the older cop, like, man, this dude seems like he knows what he's doing. And the young guy, Pac-Man, was like just wild, and kind of seeing that. And even now, like when I go and watch movies, it's like, they're kind of not hitting on a whole lot. I will say that if you want to see something that depicts police work the right way is obviously The Wire, right?
The Wire.
The Wire.
Everybody's told me I need to watch it. I've never watched it.
Yeah, so I don't. Well, obviously, I'm a nerd, dude. I read books like all the time. But a buddy of mine gave me all 5 seasons on DVD years ago of The Wire, and I would come home at night after getting off work and just watch episode after episode after episode. So if you watch The Wire, you basically kind of see
Pretty much a cop or a gang member.
You see how things operate, and it's legit, and you actually get to see behind. Anyway, enough of that.
I love it.
Good, man.
And you had mentioned. So, are we allowed to mention that you like to read, but you also like to write? Do you want to plug?
Yeah.
Do you want to plug that really quick before we go?
Yeah. So I do write. I've done multiple articles for magazine, Skill Set magazine.
Skill Set magazine. I've actually seen it in many of the grocery stores around here.
Yeah. It's
kind of would you say it's a modern day Soldier of Fortune? Maybe
it's like Soldier of Fortune, Thrasher. Remember Maxim magazine?
Yeah.
Kind of the humor. You know what I mean? Sort of like that. It's kind of it's a mixed.
There's been some really big people on the cover too. Vincent Farkas Rocco. Like I said, I see it everywhere now. Like I saw it at my local grocery store. Yeah, and I saw it in the airport at the airport in Austin, Texas. I saw it.
Yeah, it's a whatever you want to call it, like a national publication. You can get it anywhere. You can order it online. And a lot of the articles.
Black Rifle Coffee there was an article about them in there.
Yeah, so it's one of those where you may read an article about like breakdancing crews that are still existing, and then you flip the page and you're reading about someone doing missions overseas, and then you flip the page and like for me, I write a lot of historical badasses, like just people in history that people know about if they read a lot in history, but the average person has no clue.
Okay.
So then you read about it and you go, oh wow, this is teenagers that were the Churchill Club that were 13 to 16-year-olds who were sabotaging Nazis, over in Denmark. Like, there's a whole article about that. They're like the Wolverines of World War II.
Damn, sounds like a good podcast series.
Yeah. But that's what it's like, just article after article like that. And they're cool to me. They pitch ideas and they're like, yeah, we like this one. Do it up.
So that magazine is Skill Set. You can find it online. You can find it anywhere.
Yeah. And
do you write under a certain name, or do you just go completely anonymous?
It's
BC Sanders is the name.
Yeah. Which is the whole reason I even have Instagram. It's just because of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no doubt. And it's really good. I have a couple of issues at my distillery that are just kind of laying out, people constantly flipping through it. But
well, BC, will you come back? I know somebody sent a super chat in. We appreciate that, Peter. And we had another super chat from Niken. I don't always know how to say his name. Tell me how to say your name, Najken, Niken. We'll say it correctly, but wants to know if you'll come back and talk specifically more about motorcycle gangs and other stuff.
Yeah, anytime you want to talk, and you can talk other topics. You brought up white supremacists. Next time, maybe we can talk about the history behind the skinhead movement and all of that.
Is that because you look like a skinhead? He dresses in very hardcore clothing, like it's like all black with the black hats, like very California-ish. You know what I mean?
Let
Like
me ask you this.
the weird Vans.
My last question is: Am I a knockoff punk fan if I like Social Distortion? Is that too mainstream to actually?
He's really
No,
more.
that
He's
means-
he's more into Panic at the Disco.
No, look. I'll tell you what. You just went up a notch in the ladder there when you said Social Distortion. So if you dig Social D, then you just went up a damn notch, man.
Nice. All right. I love it.
Yeah. If you can name one more really good band, I'll put you up there too, man. If you got another one, but
when are you gonna put Failure to Stop?
No disrespect, man. Green Day was all they held true. They got very popular, but that was their style. They never changed.
Yeah.
When are you gonna put FTS Failure to Stop in Skill Set?
I don't know.
The greatest fucking
I don't know.
police
We'll have to
podcast
see.
there is.
We'll
the
see,
most
man.
real deal police podcast in existence. Well, hey man, we really appreciate you,
Yeah, thanks so
BC.
much, dude.
It's awesome to have you here in the studio too, and get to meet you. And I'll have you autograph something. I'll send it to you, Mike.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me on, y'all.
All right, boys and girls, guns up, giddy up. Thanks for listening to the Failure to Stop show. Go tell your friends if you like what we're doing on the show. Any of our styles of shows, whether it's guests like BC today, or whether we do our case breakdowns or our news. Our news commentary, whatever it is, whatever we're doing, if you like it, hey, tell your shift mates, tell your friends, spread the word about the show, go leave a review. We appreciate it, and we will see you, I don't know when, but soon.
Yeah, hammer that like button if you're still here. All 235 of you still watching at the end. Freaking hammer that like button, baby. Throw us a boner. A bone. A bone. Not a boner.
Well, I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah, who
we'll see
cares?
what
Throw us
happens.
a boner.
We'll
I
see
don't
where it
care.
goes. Okay.